Hello everyone, and thank you for watching VATV this evening. My name is Tram Nguyen. VATV is the voice of Vietnamese Americans in the Greater Boston area. It is sponsored by VATAID, Vietnamese American Initiative for Development. The first half of our 1-hour weekly program is in Vietnamese, and the second half is in English. You can watch us live every Wednesday evening from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Channel 9 if you have Comcast and Channel 15 if you have RCN. You can also watch us on bnntv.org. And if you happen to miss our live program, it will rebroadcast on Sunday at 5 p.m., Monday at 1 p.m., and Tuesday at 11 a.m. And to watch any of our TV shows, please go to our homepage at vataid.org. And for today's program, we have with us Mr. Dan Conley. And can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name's Dan Conley. I am presently serving as the District Attorney here in Boston, Suffolk County District Attorney, and I am a candidate for Mayor of Boston this coming September, next month.
So I think that to open up, can you just give us an idea of what your platform is, just so we have a general, I think that the Vietnamese audience is really interested in why.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm a candidate for Mayor of Boston because I believe we have a very good city, but our best days are ahead with some modest reforms and improvements. Most importantly among them is education. You know, while the education system works for some families, it doesn't work for all. So I'm emphasizing changes in our school system that'll make improvements, that'll empower parents, and it'll make things better for the children. So for example, I'm in favor of lifting the cap on charter schools. Charter schools are schools that are chartered from state government, but they perform independently from the system, the school system. The decisions and the curriculum and the ideas are developed by the teachers and by the principal. So it's autonomous, and this is where you see a lot of creativity and innovation. And our charter schools, which are public schools, are performing at a much higher level. I'm in favor of a longer school day so we can bring back art and music and physical fitness. I'm in favor of more teacher training so that our teachers will get better at what they do. Great teachers matter and can make a big difference. And I'm going to push very hard for more parental engagement. But even before children get to school, I believe all children in Boston, even if they can't afford it, should have access to high quality preschool. Studies show that children who have that opportunity at age 3 and 4 will hit the ground running when they arrive at school. The achievement gap will be closed that we see in some of our minority students, and that they will ultimately be successful. In order to be a contributor in the 21st century, you're certainly going to, here in Boston, with our knowledge-based economy, you'll need to have certainly graduated from high school and gone on to at least a 2 and hopefully a 4-year college in one of the disciplines that I call STEM, well, many people call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. That's my education idea. I can expand on other ideas if you want, or we can go into questions.
Well, what's your vision for public safety and other issues in the community?
Yeah, sure. So with respect to public safety, there's no candidate running for Mayor of Boston that has the kind of public safety experience that I have. As I mentioned at the outset, I'm presently the district attorney, so I'm the chief law enforcement officer right now in Boston. But this is where I began my career after law school. I know you just graduated from law school, so when I was about your age, I joined the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office to work to serve victims, people who have been injured as a result of violence, or had property taken them from force, or had been property taken to them through embezzlement, things of this nature. So this has really been my life's work, supporting and serving victims of these types of crimes, because oftentimes the people that are victimized are people who themselves are living in poverty and living on life's margins, and I've always been drawn to help those sorts of individuals. And we do that each and every day in the DA's office. When I began my career as an assistant DA, things were much different in Boston with respect to crime and violence. Now, we know we still have these sorts of things that go on that happen in every big city, but Boston is one of the safest big cities in America. And just to give you one statistic that illustrates that, in 1989, I believe it was, or 90, we had 150 homicides in our city. Today, here August 13th or 14th, whatever we are at, 28 homicides in Boston. So you see how far we've come in just that one category. Still 28 too many, but we are a very safe city, and that took a lot of hard work. It took working with police, doing community policing, make sure we had more police officers on the street, but doing prevention work and intervention work in our communities and our community-based organizations to drive crime down to some of its lowest levels.
I know that you started many programs in your time in public service, so the programs obviously have been very successful. How do you envision expanding on them or implementing complementary programs?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I lead one of the most progressive district attorney's offices in the country, so we're always looking for new and creative ways to help victims and to prevent crime before it happens, or to intervene in young lives before they go terribly astray. So, you know, some of the things that we've done is really taken a strong interest in supporting victims of domestic violence and child abuse. I created a building, not a building, but a program in a building called the Family Justice Center. And the Family Justice Center serves victims of domestic violence as well as children who have been abused as kids. It not only works to hold the individuals, the offenders, accountable, but it works to heal the victims of this sort of violence. I've also began several years ago to treat young child prostitutes as victims of child abuse themselves. Instead of prosecuting them, instead of throwing the heavy arm of the law at them, I try to help them break that cycle because they're being abused and trafficked by men typically, and that has to stop. So that's you know, another program that I instituted. We've also been in the schools of Boston, all over the city, doing an anti-violence curriculum, teaching children about internet safety and how to be a good citizen on the internet, and also not to be a bully at school. Bullying behaviors often translate ultimately into problems on the street and beyond. So these are some of the ideas that I've implemented as the district attorney. And again, I point to the fact that I'm not only solely responsible for this, but crime is now at some of the lowest levels it's ever been in our city.
I mean, which is great, and I noticed that you also started the court reform. What are your ideas for that going forward?
Well, you know, as a prosecutor, we must hold people accountable when they break the law, and there must be accountability in order for there to be justice for victims. But unfortunately, when there's accountability, the offender gets a criminal record. That criminal record stays with them for the rest of their lives. Very hard for someone who has a criminal record to get a decent paying job.
Exactly.
And someone asked me this question just this morning. They asked me, you know, what does CORI stand for? Criminal Offender Record Information. So every time a young person who has a criminal record fills out an application, he's going to have to put that down. Eventually, you don't have to put it down now because we changed the law on that. But eventually, before the employer makes the offer to you, you're going to have to, that's going to be found out.
Right.
And that really hurts a young person's attempt to get back into society and be productive. So I've been probably the only district attorney in Massachusetts to support some level of CORI reform. That piece I was talking about was called Check the Box. In the old days, if you filled out your application, you had to actually check the box, I have a criminal record. That's one thing we did away with. So the hope is at least the employer might say, give the person a fair shot, and if they like the person, if they ultimately find out they have a criminal record, they might say, all right, I'm going to give this guy a chance, or this young woman a chance, that they wouldn't ordinarily if that box was checked. So that's just one idea. And we got to probably think about maybe...
And this goes across the board to all employers, both private and...
Private and public. But, you know, we work so very hard in reentry. Reentry goes hand in hand with CORI reform. Reentry is when someone is leaving prison, you have to be there to help them transition into society. Because if they don't transition in the first, say, week or two, they're very likely to go back to their old ways, and then we're going to see them again. And that's not what we want.
Right. That's great. So moving, going to job and economy, you know,
Sure.
the economy right now, it's not that great, especially for someone just graduating from school.
Yeah.
But what is your vision in expanding jobs, and especially with diversity? We were talking about this earlier. How do you see the office or City Hall expanding diversity, especially with Vietnamese
Sure.
Bostonians?
Yeah. Well, we live in a very diverse city, and diversity, the richness of the diversity of the city is contributing to our livability and our vibrancy. So that's something we have to support and promote. When it comes to law enforcement particularly, it is crucial that our law enforcement professionals reflect the demographics, the diversity of Boston. So I've tried very hard over my years as district attorney, and if I'm elected mayor of Boston, I will push very hard as well for continued efforts to expand the diversity of our workforce. In my office, that meant going out to law schools and talking to special or affinity groups. You may have belonged to the Vietnamese or the Asian Law Students Association. There's generally in every law school a black law students association, a Latino law students association. Right. And so I spent some time going out and recruiting in these law schools to try to get young people interested in our work. The same applies to, I think, the police department in Boston. You've got to get out to the colleges, you've got to get out to the communities to really recruit people of color and racial minorities to come in and apply for the job. Right. A lot of times they don't think of police work, for example, or municipal work as an alternative. If we want to have a diverse workforce, we have to get in there and recruit hard for it. So I would envision a heavy recruitment process, especially in public safety, and that will pay dividends, perhaps not immediately, but years down the road when these young officers develop and become the leaders in the future.
Well, I think that's something I want to touch upon because, yes, I mean, the recruiting part is very crucial, but I think that retaining a diverse pool of people is the key because moving forward to leadership positions, I feel like, the fire department, the police department, there aren't many people of color in the top. So do you have any programs to help people of color move forward?
Well, you'd be interested to know that there's not much, there's not a big problem with retention in the police department or retention in the fire department because they're good paying jobs with the prospect of a good pension down the road. So we don't see a lot of people leave. That's a problem in my office because we only pay a rather modest wage for the skill set. It's just a matter of the budget that we've been given. It's not by design. I'd love to pay my young prosecutors a lot more money. Right. For me, it's very hard to hang on to talented minority lawyers. Not so for the police department. They tend to stay, that's a career. Once you make a decision at 25 or 30, even 35, they typically stay right through to the end. So that's why I say it's very important. If you go to an academy graduation class, it's say 60 people, and there's only, 8 people of color, then you're going to have a problem somewhere down the line. So, we are barred by law from giving racial preferences anymore, but that doesn't mean we can't push harder and harder to get more people of color to really be interested in this work, especially language skills can be hugely helpful. I can't think of too many Vietnamese Americans who are Boston police officers, but that skill set would be very helpful because, as we know, there's a growing Vietnamese population in our city. Right. And if, God forbid, they become victims of crime, in the neighborhoods of Boston, we need officers that can respond and deal with it in a culturally competent way. Same is true for Black and Latino officers and other racial minorities as well.
So do you have any connection with the Vietnamese community prior to this? I know you lived in South Boston, which is right next to Dorchester.
Yeah, I've been to a number of Vietnamese events over the years. I've worked with the association on Dorchester Avenue. I've been to the temple. When I was in Rosendale, I represented an area where there was a Vietnamese Buddhist temple.
Right,
and I visited on many occasions. I'm intrigued and fascinated by the Vietnamese culture. I have to admit, I like the food too, so I stop by once in a while for a nice bite to eat. But the Vietnamese community has added so much vibrancy, as I said, to our city. I mean, you just really notice it probably more so in Dorchester than anywhere else, but there's small businesses, they're employing people, they're offering goods and services in a way that the Vietnamese citizens want. So if I'm fortunate enough to be elected mayor, I really want to promote small business, and I want to assist small business not only to establish but to grow.
Okay.
And I look forward to working with the Vietnamese community and doing that and accomplishing that.
So how do you envision helping small businesses? You're right, you hit the nail right on the head. That's what a lot of Vietnamese Bostonians are interested in. A lot of them
And so
are
many
small
of our,
businesses.
so many of the jobs in our city and in our country and our state are small business. So we have to have a small business center which has language diversity as well. So not only establishing small business, but how do you take it to the next level?
Okay.
There are people that are out there and they have great ideas, they have a great concept, and they just can't get it to the next level. So I'm really going to establish a center where people who have already have a small business, not looking to start one. We have good services there already, pretty much. Now, how do we take it to the next level? How do we make a 2 or 3 person operation turn into a 30-person operation and really grow? So that's what I'm going to invest a lot of effort into doing if I'm, elected mayor of Boston.
And speaking of growth, so I mean, if you were to get elected as mayor, what's your long-term goal for Boston generally?
Well, I want to make sure that we address this education dilemma problem. It's been perplexing for years. There's a small percentage of our population who are just trapped in underperforming schools, and they need that opportunity to break that cycle. I think it begins with that universal high-quality preschool education for all kids 3 and 4. But I also believe that charter schools should be grown. They should expand in Boston. Right now, there's a cap. There cannot be any more. And those schools are performing at a very high level, and those ought to be options for parents. So I think, I would like to think that after 8 or 12 years, let's say if I was the mayor, that we would look back on my term and say, this mayor is the first mayor who finally closed the achievement gap for all students in Boston, no matter what ethnicity or race they're from. And that almost every kid graduates from high school, and most of those go on to college, and most of them are working in industries that are thriving in Massachusetts and Boston. High-tech, biotech, clean energy jobs, software development, medical, pharmaceuticals. This is where the jobs are going to be in the 21st century. Boston is like it's not the hottest city for startups, but it is almost there. I want to make it the hottest city in America for startups. And I think one way to do that, using the word hot again, is to make Boston a hot spot.
Okay.
Everywhere in our city, you can connect to a high-speed internet through Wi-Fi. And if that's the case, people can start their businesses in Dorchester on Dorchester Ave,
Right.
or in Roxbury or Mattapan or Hyde Park where I grew up, or East Boston, which is an emerging area in our city. These are great opportunities for us, and I intend to push very hard to support and promote the innovation economy in Massachusetts, and particularly, I should say, in Boston.
I want to go back a little bit on the charter school. I'm very unfamiliar with that. So how do you envision expanding the number of charter schools?
Yes.
But how do you recruit students to them? I think that's one. Boston Latin, we have great schools in the city, but I guess not many students can even get in.
Right.
So how do you?
So yeah, as you mentioned, Boston Latin Academy are terrific schools. They're exam schools with limited numbers of seats.
Right.
Charter schools are public schools that are formed by individuals, typically, with ideas, a concept, an idea, and they are allowed to basically establish an educational environment in our city and a plan to succeed. A lot of them already have done so successfully. So, for example, Excel Academy, there's several of them. The Brook Charter School, there are several of them. They have a good track record. Their program works. Their children, their students are succeeding. So if they apply for a charter, that's why they're called charter schools from state government, they establish a school in a municipality, in our case Boston. And the children are drawn from the pool of students who apply to the Boston Public Schools for a seat. Your previous guests that were here in the half hour before we are, that's the entry point for students to register as students. And parents can choose a charter school. The good thing about charter schools, in my mind, is they're autonomous. They're not taking direction from headquarters up at 26 Court Street. They are the drivers of innovation. They are the drivers of change, and they have been the drivers of success.
And I mean, I think your vision for public education is great. And we have 1 minute left. So
Okay.
if you have a general message to our audience as to why should we vote for Dan Conley?
You know, I know that particularly the Vietnamese community, most of the Vietnamese community were born elsewhere. They were born in Vietnam and not here in Boston. And I'm now second generation Italian American, even though my name is Conley. My mother's family is Italian and came from Italy. My father's family came from Ireland a little earlier in time. I understand the immigrant experience. I understand how when people come to our country for opportunity and a chance, I reflect on my own grandfather who came to East Boston as a very young man by himself, didn't speak a word of English, but fortunately had an uncle here who took him in, gave him a place to sleep. And my grandfather, by dint of hard work, was able to get a job as a tailor. That's what he did. Had a 6th grade education. Was able to marry, raise a family. My mother and her siblings went to high school. Now their children go on to college. And my grandfather's grandson, me, is running for mayor of Boston. So I understand the immigrant experience. I cherish it, I value it, and I will be a great friend to the Vietnamese community if I'm elected mayor of Boston.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you so much for tuning in to VATV. And we'll see you next week.